Doha's night sky opened with a sound people do not forget. Windows shook, phones lit up. In minutes, rumors outran the smoke. Israel had hit targets in the Qatari capital, going after Hamas leaders who, for years, worked their politics from hotel conference rooms and quiet offices. Within the hour, streets were blocked, sirens layered over one another, and the questions started echoing. Who was hit? Why Qatar? Why now? The first answers were blunt. Israel had targeted Hamas leadership in Doha. Hamas officials said their top leaders survived, though several others were killed, including at least one Qatari security officer. Qatar's government called it a violation of sovereignty and international law. Ankara called it state terrorism. Washington said it had little advance warning and did not participate. Condemnations multiplied. The story was already bigger than the blast. To understand this night, you need the long thread behind it. Over the past 2 years, Israel has hunted Hamas's senior figures beyond Gaza. Salas al-Aruri was killed in Beirut in January 2024. That summer, Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran. Each strike moved the front line from trenches and tunnels to apartments and motorcades far from the battlefield. Each strike said the same thing in a different language. Geography is not immunity. So who did Israel try to hit in Doha? Khalil al-Hayya, a veteran Hamas official and a key player in the group's external leadership, has been central in negotiations for prisoner exchanges and ceasefires. Reports say he survived this attack. If you have followed the war, you have heard his name in the context of talks, travel, and leverage. Taking him off the board would not just remove a leader, it would cross out a communicator. It would also blast a hole in Qatar's role as mediator, which is exactly why Doha called the strike a sabotage of diplomacy. But this is not only about a name, it is about messages layered inside missiles. Message 1. To Hamas. Israel is signaling that overseas leadership is not untouchable, and that time and travel do not offer cover. After the killings of Aruri and Haniyeh, analysts warned that Jerusalem might pursue a strategy of decapitating Hamas's external command until it can declare a form of victory. A strike in Doha keeps that arc intact and tells remaining leaders their addresses are now part of the battlefield. Message 2. To hosts and patrons. Qatar has hosted Hamas's political office for years while mediating between Israel and Hamas. Hitting Doha is a hard nudge to the hosts. It says that providing space to adversaries carries costs that may arrive uninvited. It also pressures mediators at the most delicate moment by forcing them to prove they can still shepherd talks after being burned on their own soil. Qatar's prime minister answered quickly that nothing would deter its mediation, but the shock is real and the legal response is being prepared. Message 3. To the region. In late August, senior Israeli officials said openly that Hamas leadership abroad would be reached. This strike is the punctuation on that sentence. It is also a test of Gulf unity and Arab public patience. When the blast is in Doha rather than Gaza City, every capital between Muscat and Rabi has to recalibrate not just policy but public expectations. Message 4. To Washington. The White House stated it had little warning and was very unhappy. That choice of words matters. Israel is asserting operational independence while the United States must manage fallout with an ally that hosts its largest regional airbase and is central to ceasefire talks. That triangle of interests, Israel, Qatar, United States, now has a scorch mark right in the middle. Now, the part people will argue about for months, the hidden agendas. Start with leverage. When negotiations stall, one way to move the pieces is to remove a player. Assassinations are crude leverage. They can break chains of trust, force new intermediaries to emerge, and change which demands feel realistic. Killing or attempting to kill senior figures can also prompt rivals inside Hamas to compete for control, weakening the organization in the short term. That is the tactical math. The risk is obvious. You can also unify a fractured movement by giving it a funeral. Analysts have warned of both effects since the 2024 killings. Next is domestic politics. Israeli leaders under pressure at home sometimes pursue operations that demonstrate reach and resolve abroad. A strike this bold plays to the domestic audience that wants decisive action and a narrative of momentum. It reframes headlines away from stalemate and toward initiative. It also dares critics to call it counterproductive while the blast dust is still settling. Then deterrence. Israel is speaking to more than Hamas. It is speaking to Hezbollah, to militias in Syria and Iraq, and to Iran. The line is, If you provide sanctuary or coordination to Hamas, sanctuaries can be made unsafe. That is a regional message written in the language of risk. Finally, negotiation framing. Some in Israel's security establishment have argued that the path out of a grinding war is not only territorial gains, but the removal of specific names. The thinking goes like this: if enough architects of October 7th are dead or permanently underground, Israel can scale down operations while claiming it met core objectives. You can hear that idea in think tank analysis after Haniyeh's death and in public comments about reaching leaders abroad. So how will Arab governments and Arab publics take this? Officially, the reaction has been fast and severe. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, and Bahrain lined up with statements condemning the strike. The GCC as a bloc expressed full solidarity with Qatar and support for any measures Doha decides to take. Turkey's language was especially sharp, calling it terrorism. That chorus is important. It says this was not just another Gaza strike. It was an attack inside a Gulf capital. On the street, expect anger to run ahead of policy. The blast will revive calls to expel Israeli diplomats where they exist, to freeze emerging normalization tracks, and to condition any future talks on explicit limits to Israeli actions beyond Gaza. It will also sharpen debates inside the Gulf about hosting movements that bring foreign fire to local skies. In places where publics already sympathize deeply with Gaza, the Doha strike will feel like humiliation laid on top of grief. Inside Qatar, there will be two urgent tasks. First, to reassure citizens and residents that the state can protect the capital from foreign strikes. Second, to prove to international partners that Doha's unique position as mediator is not broken. That means legal steps, diplomatic pressure, and very likely a push in the UN system to put a price on violating a sovereign capital during ongoing ceasefire talks. Doha has already said it will not back off its mediator role. Watch for coordinated GCC language that turns that promise into a region-wide stance. Will this derail a ceasefire? It could. Killing negotiators or trying to kill them usually freezes their channels. It also tempts retaliation from groups aligned with Hamas, which could widen the map of escalation. On the other hand, pressure sometimes creates a brief, narrow window where all sides want to avoid a slide into something worse. If a ceasefire outline was close, some actors may try to sprint through that window before it slams. The next 72 hours will tell you which story we are in. Here is the sober truth. The strike in Doha is not a plot twist. It is a reveal. It shows that this war's center of gravity left Gaza a long time ago and now sits wherever decisions are made about it. Beirut, Tehran, Doha, Jerusalem, Washington. Removing leaders is a tactic. It is not a plan. Plans live in the space where adversaries decide what tomorrow looks like and choose something other than more names on more lists. As the smoke thinned, Doha's skyline went back to being a postcard swallowed by light. But for the people who heard the night go loud, the city will sound different for a while. Security lines will be longer. Diplomatic meetings will feel less off the record. Every siren will ask a question. And somewhere, a negotiator will sit back down at a table, because that is what negotiators do after they bury colleagues or count their luck. He will pick up a pen and try to write a sentence that makes sense again, a prisoner exchange. A pause that holds, a roadmap that survives contact with reality. If that sentence is ever written, it will have to pass through Doha. After tonight, that is both a promise and a dare.